It's well known. It's a well-known issue that African Americans, black people in America, so-called, don't know their history, that they're cut off from the history of Africa, and even the history of everything that they did and everything that was done to them in America. That's why you have Black History Month, right? So this is something that everyone knows about. Everyone is aware of this issue. But the truth is that so-called white people don't know their history either. Their history in America or their history in Europe. Americans generally don't know history.
Hello brothers and sisters, I really hope you're all doing fine from wherever you are watching me from. Now, Shahid Bolsen has been calling out on the African leaders to come together and realize that it is time to work for their people and saying no to imperialism that is coming from the West. Now, he has been also commenting on the Western culture that has destroyed countries, that has destroyed morals across the world and across Africa. So let's watch this video, then have a really quick discussion at the end of it. Thank you so much.
Which is incredibly useful when you consider the fact that history repeats itself. It's incredibly useful to keep the entire population in a state of amnesia, so that the whole country operates like the main character in that film Memento, you know? So you keep doing the same things that you've always done, and you never understand that you're actually doing the things that history has already judged to be crimes. You understand? You can do it as if there's no context, as if there's no history, as if there's no pattern. That's the whole point of approaching current events from an ahistorical perspective. You don't want anyone to see the pattern. You want to be able to do things that have already been condemned by history, but you want to keep doing them anyway, as if you don't know that they're contemptible. You don't know that they are condemned actions. Just like Donald Trump now invoking the Alien Enemies Act in reference to mass deportations and so on. Okay, this is the same act that put tens of thousands of Japanese Americans into internment camps in World War II, and for which the United States government eventually had to provide compensation and eventually had to even apologize for doing it. You see, it is something completely contemptible that you did, but you want to repeat it. So you forget your history. You forget history so you can repeat history without blame. Both so-called white people and so-called black people in America don't know their history. Both have been told lies about the past, about their respective pasts. And the only reason for that is for the purpose of maintaining the continuity of the contemptible reality of how that society operates. Amnesia and fictional histories serve as a preventative measure against change, against reform, against rehabilitation. America chooses to live like it's in the movie Groundhog Day. You know, you pretend that only today exists over and over and over again. And because of this forced amnesia, because of this deliberate suppression of historical awareness, the people in America don't even recognize when they're reliving their own past. They think that they're facing something new. They think that they're responding to some unprecedented crisis every time. If you have no recollection where the road leads that you're on, then you'll keep walking it again and again, never realizing that it has already led you into disaster after disaster, dozens of times before. And this is exactly the condition that the rulers in America want, that the elite of America want, not just for black people, not just for so-called white people, but for everyone. Because the most effective way to ensure that a crime continues is to make sure that it is never recognized as a crime. To make sure that every time you commit that crime, it feels like the first time. You know? So when Trump talks about invoking the Alien Enemies Act, most Americans don't hear the echoes of history from that. They don't hear the voices of the Japanese Americans who were dragged from their homes and put behind barbed wire for years and years. They don't remember that that country had to apologize for doing exactly what they're about to do again. The American mind resets every morning, and that's the perfect condition for those in power. Because if people really understood history, then they would recognize that nothing about the American system is accidental. Every aspect of it, from its racial hierarchies to its economic disparities to its unjust foreign policies, is simply the continuation of an old script, a script that has played out again and again, always leading to oppression, always leading to exploitation, always leading to war, always leading to misery. And this is why in America, history isn't taught. Fiction is taught, legends are taught, myths are taught, but not history. Because real history would be dangerous. Real history would break the illusion and potentially break the cycle. So-called white people in America know a version of history. They know a story. They know a narrative that has been carefully crafted to shape how they see themselves, how they see their ancestors, how they see their nations and their place in the world, and how they see everyone else. And this ignorance, this deliberate miseducation that they have imposed upon their own people allows the same crimes to continue. What most white people in America and Europe believe about their history is not history at all. It's mythology designed to produce a specific kind of person. A person who does not feel guilty. A person who does not feel accountable. A person who does not feel responsible for ever changing anything because they don't think they're doing anything wrong. They're taught that their ancestors were pioneers. Their ancestors were explorers and builders of civilization. That they've brought progress and democracy and enlightenment to the world. They hear about the Renaissance. They hear about the Industrial Revolution. They hear about the Age of Discovery and so forth and so on. And not about enslavement, not about genocide, not about the theft, not about the destruction that their people are responsible for. They're not taught that their prosperity was built on unimaginable suffering. They're not taught that their systems of government, their financial empires, their very sense of national identity are all rooted in exploitation. They don't know about the crimes. They don't know the real legacy of their people. And so they don't change. They don't have to change because they don't even realize what they need to correct. You know, when we look at colonialism, for example, the history that's taught in Western schools is usually an abstraction. Colonization is framed as something that it just sort of happened a long time ago, you know, something that was maybe unfortunate, but it was inevitable, and ultimately it represented progress, and there were many beneficial things to come from it. Never mind the millions of Africans who died in the Congo Free State under King Leopold. Most white Americans have never heard of them. Never mind the Bengal famine of 1943 when millions of Indians starved to death due to British policies. They don't even know about it. The fact that the American police forces evolved from slave patrols, they don't know about that either. And they're not any more informed about the ongoing crimes, like the pillage of African resources today, the economic neocolonialism that keeps entire regions of the world impoverished, the exploitation of labor in the global South. These aren't relics of history. That's the present day reality of what your people are doing. But the story that white people are told does not include those realities, or else it packages those realities deceitfully and dishonestly. They package them dishonestly and deceitfully in the past just like they do now. The irony is that when they're confronted with the truth, many of these people will react defensively. You know, I didn't do that. That was in the past. Why should I feel guilty? But this reaction in and of itself reveals how little they're really understanding. It's not about guilt. It's about responsibility. You know, if a person inherits a stolen house, they may not have stolen it themselves, but they still live in it. And if they refuse to acknowledge where that house came from or how it came into their possession, if they insist that that house is rightfully theirs because the crime happened a long time ago, well, then they're complicit because the theft is ongoing. The crime never really stopped. So when people don't know their history, they cannot recognize when history is repeating itself and when history is actually just a continuum into the present. This is why so-called white people in America can watch their government arm and support genocide in Gaza, bomb Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and so on, and actually believe when they say it's for the purpose of security. They don't see the colonial mindset at work. That's why they can see corporations, for example, Western corporations, strip mine Africa for resources and not connect that to the centuries of plunder that came before. This is why they can hear about mass incarceration, about police brutality and systemic racism in the United States, and not understand that these are not new problems. These are just new forms of an old system. These are new manifestations of the same system. And this is why they don't resist, why they don't challenge the structures that continue to exploit and continue to oppress. because they don't even recognize those systems as continuations of the age-old exploitation and oppression. The truth is, white people have been colonized too. Not physically, not economically, but psychologically. They've been conditioned to believe in a history that never happened. A history where they were always the heroes. A history where they were never the villains, and where their victims were villains. And as long as they live inside that fiction, well, they'll continue to perpetuate the same crimes of their past, even without realizing it. Which just means that we're not even talking about past crimes. We're talking about ongoing crimes from the past until today. Like I said, it's a continuum. If there's ever going to be any real change, if there's ever going to be any hope for justice, then so-called white people have to actually learn your history. Not the history that makes you feel proud and makes you feel good, that makes you feel comfortable, but real history, the history that makes you uncomfortable, the history that you've denied all this time. And only when white people know their real history, really know it, then maybe they can begin to take the first steps towards repairing the damage that that history caused. The damage that it caused to millions upon millions of people all around the world, including themselves. I mean, Americans, particularly so-called white Americans, you're all like the child of the BTK killer, trying to come to terms with the fact that you were raised by a monster who you always thought was a good and upright man. If Americans in general really understood their history, well, they would know that the United States government has only ever used fear as a weapon against them. And every war that America has ever been involved in was only justified by lies. And every act of domestic repression has only ever been framed as being necessary for the sake of security. They would know that the anti-immigration movements, the anti-Muslim ban and so forth, and all of their surveillance programs, it's not new. It's the same thing. It's just rebranded versions of old crimes. There's absolute continuity. And the only reason that you don't know that is because you have no actual understanding of your own history. Yes, if Americans truly understood their history, they would not be so easily manipulated. They would not be so easily controlled. They would not be so quick to repeat the wrongs of the past, or rather to continue the wrongs of the past. But that's exactly why history is hidden from them. I mean, it's trite but true. There is nothing more powerful than knowledge. There's nothing more dangerous to a corrupt system than a population that remembers. And that's why our mission must be to educate people and to awaken people and to reconnect people with the reality of their own history, the good and the bad. Because when you understand your history, then you'll understand your enemy, because they've been doing the same thing throughout history. And when you understand your enemy, then you'll understand how to defeat them. You'll understand how to oppose them, because you've got an enemy who keeps you in a state of amnesia and a state of fake implanted memories. You know, every time you open your eyes, your enemy is right there in front of you telling you that he's your friend. And because you don't remember anything, you believe him. You understand? The whole country is getting their drink spiked. Everyone in that country is getting roofied. And the one who spikes your drink and the one who abuses you when you're in your numb and unconscious state is the one sitting next to you in the morning when you come to, holding your hand, your protector. Oh, it's insidious. Uncle Sam is a serial killer. The son of Sam's got nothing on Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam is the most prolific, psychopathic, diabolical, demonic mass murderer in history. I mean, look at that poster again, that Uncle Sam poster, that I Want You poster. Think about that. You would think that a character who's supposed to represent the great democratic America would actually be asking the people, what do you want? Not demanding, I want you to go off into the meat grinder of World War I and World War II, over 500,000 American soldiers killed in Europe and in Asia, thousands of miles from the United States. And then basically some 20-something years later, the same message is repeated. And it's heralded as a great quote, it's heralded as a great statement from John F. Kennedy. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Why? That's not how this works. Talk about gaslighting. Imagine if someone said that in a relationship. You know, I need you to do this and that and the other, and don't even ask me about what you need me to do for you. No, your government, your power structure hates you. But worse than hating you, they don't even respect you. And like I said, a major reason for that is that they have perfected the process of completely wiping out your memory. But the power structure has a memory. So you understand, that's what's really meant by history repeating itself. People think that this is some sort of natural law. No, it's not natural law. It's just the unchanged, consistent behavior of a predatory power structure. It's the law of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Meaning they've been doing the same thing for a very long time. And the system works for them. So they have no reason to change it. And they never will change it until you change. And that's why they want to make sure that you never know what's going on. They want to make sure that you never know what's been going on. And why they keep you basically like a crackhead. I'm serious. Just like a crackhead. The American population, is like a crackhead. Extreme desperation for short-term gratification. Complete memory blackouts. No recall of past consequences of their actions. Mood swings, volatile, erratic, can't cope with reality. And you'll sell your dignity just to get some relief. That's why they don't respect you. The same way that a drug dealer doesn't respect a crackhead. Because they can treat you any kind of way. And you'll accept it. You'll accept it as long as you can get a hit of propaganda, a hit of entertainment, a hit of distraction, or what have you. Anything to just help you forget the reality that you live in. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that the condition of a people will not change until they move to change it themselves. And that's why they've neutralized you, because otherwise history might not repeat itself. Because they're the ones who are making history repeat itself by just continuing to do what they've always done. You understand what I'm saying? See, this isn't cyclical, it's constant, uninterrupted, the oppression, the violence, the exploitation, the predation. This is all static, unchanging. You say history repeats itself, it makes it sound like you're talking about a cycle, but it's not a cycle. It's not even a loop, it's a straight line. And it has never swerved, not even once. It's one scene, it's the same scene. Year after year, decade after decade, and all they ever do is maybe change the lighting to make it look different, to make it look new. But nothing has changed. But you won't know that as long as you have no memory, as long as you have no actual memory, not the implanted fake memories.
Hello, brothers and sisters. I really hope you're all doing fine from wherever you are watching me from now. It is yet another time we are here, and we all talking about the African unity, the Black unity. Now, I've been loving so far the content of Shahid Bolsen, the owner of Middle Nation. Now, the guy has been talking about the facts that we need to hear and those that we need to take into consideration when we talk about the Black unity. Sometimes we focus so much on the unity of Black folks, and for that reason, we've gone ahead to forget the fundamentals that we need for actually to bring the Black people together. The Western systems have been there, and it is time we stop complaining about the Western systems. What are we doing for ourselves? What are we doing for the continent of Africa and the diaspora to make sure that this unity is inevitable? Now, let's remember where this continent came from. We have had big names in Africa, and the latest was Muammar Gaddafi. Now, it must be remembered that Muammar Gaddafi brought the first ever satellite to Africa. Before that, when calling someone from Africa, anywhere around Africa, even in the same village that you live in, the call had to go through Europe, and it was to be intercepted back to Africa so that you could make your call. Now, that was so hectic and that was so expensive, and Muammar Gaddafi sat down and saw the whole thing unfolding, and he decided, for one reason or the other, he's going to make sure that Africa gets its first satellite. Now, he gave around $400 million, and the rest of Africa contributed around $100 million. It is basically he bought that satellite for Africa. Now, for that reason, Africa started uniting, Now, you could do content in Africa you could call around Africa and it became cheaper, And that was the first step for us to bring the continent of Africa close. Before that, things were very difficult in Africa and it was almost impossible to connect Africans. Now, Muammar Gaddafi was eliminated for several reasons, including talking about the unity of Africa, you know among other very, very big things that they accused him. And it is sad that we had to believe. And actually, we are the first people who bought the lies. And we supported whatever was going on. And myself, I was young and I was in grade 4. I didn't know much about whatever was happening in Africa at the moment. But those who were big enough, we could hear them mentioning about a dictator has been taken down in one side of Africa. Now, growing up, I've come to understand that he was really not a dictator. No man is actually accurate, or no man is perfect in whatever they do. Everyone is made to error. That at one point of your life you'll make errors, and let's not judge the guy so harshly because the guy did so many things. And you all know that if you go to that country today, it is very, very very evident that after Muammar Gaddafi there is no Libya. That Libya collapsed when Muammar Gaddafi was taken down. We do not want to focus on a single story of a man. We do not want to focus on a single story of Africa. The biggest thing that Africa has denied itself is unity. We go around fighting ourselves, and this is whatever Shahid Bolsen has been talking about. That Africa has been made a field of extraction. That anytime someone comes to Africa, all they see is the mineral resources in Africa. Every time the Western countries talks about Africa, they are discussing the mineral resources in your own countries. They even have the guts to go ahead and discuss how your presidents use the mineral resources. Now, if they do not implant the presidents or the leaders you have, they then have a problem with that leader if he actually is on the side of the people. How are we gonna change this story? Sometimes we talk much about how Africa should come together and how the black folks should unite. Then we go ahead and forget that it is us who are sabotaging ourselves. That whenever we've gotten a leader who is willing to unite this continent, what have we done? We've actually made it so hard for them to unite this continent that at a point it is even difficult for the leaders to talk about the unity of Africa, because sometimes the people are not on their sides. Now, the leaders in Africa, majority of them are puppets, and they have been implanted there by the Western media. Not the Western media, by the Western powers. And the Western powers are not there to condole any kind of unity that will arise in Africa. And that's one reason that they always fight those people talking about unity. But are we willing to change the narrative in Africa? What are we willing to do? What extents are we going to do or going to go so that we make sure that our Africa is united, and we as the people in Africa are actually talking the language of black unity? Now, sometimes we must go back into the books and really study where we did go wrong. Our history was not written by us, no. It must be remembered people like Ludwig Kraft, who came to Africa, who were the first people to navigate to Africa. It must be remembered Livingstone, those people who were the first to come in Africa. They even went ahead to say how much they discovered our own countries, our own mineral resources. The same way a lie has been told to the Americans that someone else came and discovered their country. Now, the country really belonged to Indians, and when you're being lied to that someone else discovered the country, it is a lie. Indians were living there some 3,000 years ago, some 2,000 years ago. So how do you discover a country that has its own owners? How do you discover a mountain that has been there and the people have been seeing the same mountain? How do you discover a lake that the people have been there, have been seeing the lake? This lie were taught to us, and they were written in books. The rest, the story, the part of the story um, where the black people existed and how the black people did things, and they fixed a narrative that they brought a civilization. Civilization started in Africa, as a matter of fact, because this is the cradle of humankind. This is where fire began, and fire is adversely considered as the first civilization that man had, because it took man away from the bush to start cooking his own food. It took the man away from gathering, and so the man can keep warm, and not living in the bushes, and they could stay now in the caves, and maybe when it is too cold they could lit the fire and start. This is the start of civilization. So let no one else tells you how civilization started from. Now we must actually understand who we are, and we must actually be very careful on how we transact our own history. We are the custodian of our own history, and if anything goes wrong, we are the one to blame ourselves. Now, I'm not a fan or a sycophant of praises and worship of the people who I share their videos, but I do like to take or extract the most important points that resonates with the audience that I'm talking to. I love listening to Shahid Bolsen, though I'm not a Muslim, but just because of the truth the guy says. Shahid Bolsom has been a very good critic who has been coming out with bullet points that has proven all that he says about the Western culture and the Western lie that was passed to Africa and the Middle East. We must all remember that at one point or the other that we failed ourselves, and this is the time we should reclaim the glory that was taken away from us. Brothers and sisters, there is a lot that can be said about Africa, about the black unity, about everything. But as much as we are concerned, as much as we talk about ourselves, do you really still believe that someone else discovered us? Do you really believe that Sir Columbus, Christopher Columbus did discover the United States? Now, these are lies that are made, that are meant for us to believe. Do you really believe in these lies, or are you taking a step to learn? No, there is there are two things: being told something and believing in the thing. But being told something, then you take your time before believing, to clarify, to get clarity on what has been said, and to research extensively on whatever has been said, so that you don't carry rumors around, or you don't believe in rumors. I do not believe in someone discovering anything in Africa. No lake was discovered by someone. It is so crazy, and we still believe it. Even questions are being set in the exams in Africa of who discovered this, who discovered that mountain. And the answer's always been Ludwig Kraft or someone from the West, or Williams, I don't know, Prince Williams, and all those names. We do not want to see that continuing to happen. We do not want to see our own selves have been brainwashed until we do not recognize ourselves. How much more will I say that we need to change the education curriculum in Africa? That's how many times have I to shout that we should unite? How many times is Professor Shahid Bolsen, going to tell you to wake up? How many times is Ibrahim Traore going to teach you on how to live with your brothers and sisters? And how many times are you still going to follow the constitutions that have been drafted in the Western countries and brought to your people? We are not preaching, or we are not talking about anarchy, but we are talking about sovereignty. We need to come together as the people, and we need to talk to ourselves. What do we really want about ourselves? Are we going to fall to the same tricks? Are we going to fall to the same problems? Are we going to change our ways, or are we going to do whatever the master requires you to do? Let's change the story, and this is the time we can change the story. We are not going to have any other continent apart from this. Let's not support the wars in Africa. I do not support any war at any time. I do not support Iran. I do not support Israel. I do not support Palestine. I'm neutral because I know how war works. I've been a child and I've heard stories of how wars have destroyed countries, of how wars have destroyed people, and how war still continues to destroy and distract the peace of countries in Africa and across the globe. So let's not support anarchy. Let's not support Democrats who have failed our own countries, but let's support true leaders who are bringing change and who are ready to work it for their people. Thank you so much for having taken this time to listen to me, and thank you so much. I wish we could unite and have a working Africa. I wish we could do this more and more times than right now. Thank you so much. If it's your first time on this channel, please consider subscribing, sharing, commenting, and liking this video. Thank you. See you in our next episode.